Hello and welcome to Building Tomorrow's Insurer, where we explore the cutting edge of insurtech and digital innovation in the insurance industry. I am your host, Nigel Fellowes-Freeman, and today we are joined by none other than the visionary David Lynch. He is the Group CTO of bolttech, and if you haven't heard of bolttech, you should have. They are doing incredible things within the world of insurance technology. And David specifically, he has a career that spans a number of different industries, actually, which we'll dive into a lot today. Leadership roles at global banking giants like Standard & Chartered and DBS, and has really been driving the technology agenda for a couple of decades, and is now in the driving seat of the CTO at bolttech, and really is maybe fundamental in the transformative change that insurers, distributors, and customers are starting to connect with insurance and through their digital ecosystems. And so we're going to hopefully dig into a lot of that today in the episode and try and understand how David and the bolttech business are starting to think about closing that insurance gap, how they're leveraging Gen AI. I only made it through like 6 sentences before we got there, but I'm sure we'll spend a little bit of time on that today, and hyperconnected networks to really understand the bolttech business, how it's kind of transformed a lot of the world of insurance, but obviously specifically Asia, where it's kind of getting a huge amount of traction. And so thank you, David, so much for your time today. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Nigel. Great to be here.
David, I'd always love to start at the beginning. And when I did a little research, I noticed that you went to Monash, now MIT, and Kanopi is a business that was founded in Melbourne, and so it's close to my heart. And so I'd love to start there in terms of understanding your kind of beginnings, and then how you went from graduating in Monash and now MIT through your career to end up at bolttech.
Right. Well, I think a bit of background. I might start with the latest, which is the end point, or the latter point in my career, which is in insurance. I came into the insurance industry perhaps a little bit counterintuitively, where I saw it as a very boring industry, which might sound a bit strange. It was an industry that I think was lacking in engagement, innovation, and probably lacking a sense of urgency for change. As I go back through the course of my career, I've seen that as an opportunity. When I go back to the earlier stage in my career, I actually started in auto and mobility back in the days with General Motors, and have had experience in banking, sustainability, and as I said, more recently in insurance. But the consistent threads, I think, across the various roles that I've had in technology operations, customer experience, data and innovation, there's always been some kind of seismic change that was going on in those industries, and it's been very exciting to be a part of that. So if you take the auto industry as an example, I was in that industry in the pioneering days of in-vehicle telematics. In my banking experience, it was the introduction of the fintechs and the journey that we had with the fintechs in both my days at Standard Chartered and also DBS Bank, and also being a really key part of that wave in my time in Hong Kong, where with some partners we built the first dedicated fintech accelerator. And I think another interesting thing that's often talked about as a real secular trend these days is just about every industry is focusing on sustainability. That's become a really key thread. So I was lucky enough to spend a couple of years in my fairly recent career running an early stage company in the sustainability field, which was a really key part of my own personal learning. And I think that was an interesting wave that sort of followed a decade plus broadly looking at digital transformation across the industry. So that sort of brings me back to insurance again. Why have I come into insurance? So, I think I started by saying it was a relatively boring industry. What I think is very interesting is I saw the potential for insurtechs to help the insurance industry to evolve. And one of the things I can say personally, I think about what can be more powerful than finding ways to help people protect the things that they truly value. And to be able to do that with the amazing technology that we have at our fingertips today, I think that the insurance industry is becoming so much more exciting and impactful on humanity. And it's way beyond just selling insurance policies. So it's something I often talk about to potential candidates or graduates joining our company. To the outside world, it probably still seems a relatively boring industry, but I think it's becoming very, very exciting, and I think the insurtechs are playing a key role in that.
Massively key role, and that your career is so interesting, and I'm sure there must have been some really key threads that you saw within banking and the rise of fintech, and obviously the rise of insurtech has really been like following that. I've been a fast follower behind the fintech specific space. Have you seen any kind of key threads that have been similar from I guess the revolution you saw within the fintech space and now what you're driving in the insurtech space?
Definitely, there's a lot of similarity. I think when I think back to my time in banking, the time in which the fintechs were really coming on board in the industry, there needed to be a real outreach from traditional banks into these more tech-centric players. They're often looking to change, or you often hear the word disrupt, which we tend not to use as much in bolttech because we see ourselves as an enabler. But the change that was being driven more than a decade ago by the fintechs, I think it was a very exciting time to be in banking. And I think one of my key roles at the time was making sure that we were making big banking friendly enough to these newer, more nimble players so that we could reach out and create partnerships and opportunity. And I think the example that I used earlier in terms of setting up a dedicated fintech accelerator in a dynamic market like Hong Kong at the time, that was something that was really helping to take the industry forward. Got a lot of interest as well from not only the fintech community, but I think also regulators as well, who are looking to understand and support the fintech sector a lot better. So wind the clock forward a little bit to where insurance is at. It does feel like the conditions are very, very similar. It's just that it's happening a decade or a decade and a half later. So that pace of change has been a little bit slower in insurance, but I think that speed of change is really picking up now.
Yeah, we're in that kind of exponential phase, aren't we? And at bolttech, you mentioned it a little bit earlier around the customer being central to this, which is if you can transform that customer experience, then all of a sudden you close that protection gap, and folks who don't have protection today all of a sudden can get access to the products that they need. And I know that at bolttech, I think protection is one of those kind of core parts of your mission. And so I'm interested to learn, because everyone has a slightly different philosophy around this. And so I'm interested to understand how you see the industry maybe evolving to embrace predicting risk, then preventing it, and the recovery as part of that overall package versus just thinking about, I guess, the policy and paying out a claim, and how you can kind of move further forward in the value chain.
Yeah, Nigel, I love that question. And I think it's one of the most fundamental things that the insurance and protection industry is grappling with today. I think when you look historically at the value chain for insurance, it hasn't really evolved very much for many, many decades. We often talk about the same things repeatedly: customer onboarding, pricing. We talk about underwriting, and we talk about claims and servicing as key elements of the insurance value chain. But what's super interesting with the availability of data, both proprietary and third-party data, as well as the fact that we're now armed with the power of artificial intelligence, as well as cloud computing and things like 5G that are giving us incredible connectivity to the way in which things like IoT sensors can collect data. It feels like the industry is having its shift left moment. And when I say shift left moment, we saw in the software industry over a long period of time that move towards agile, and move towards faster shipping of increments to market, rather than complete reliance on rounds and rounds and rounds of testing. Higher emphasis was placed on ability to roll back and to adapt. And when you think about that in terms of what's happening in our industry, that starts to shift the thinking, as you said, away from just focusing on a better claims experience. If you went out to any insurance company today, I can guarantee they've had a program of work around improving claims or automating claims for a very, very long period of time. It's almost like a never-ending thing, and that stays very important. Let's not downplay the importance of that. But when you speak to the end customer, or you speak to the business, what do they care about most? Do they care about having a better claims experience, or would they rather they never had to make a claim to begin with? And I think what is really unwrapping this a little bit for industry participants, because of that availability of AI and data, whether that's data that you own or need to source, we are now in a position where we can create continuously learning and adaptive models. And we can also create capabilities that can predict with ever-increasing precision than what we've ever done before. But the interesting point is, just because you can predict doesn't mean that you can prevent. And the prevention needs to take place through some kind of intervention. So that could be education. It could be an alert, say from a wearable device. It could be a nudge or some other form of intervention. But there has to be something that triggers a different course of action, that the predictive model is suggesting that an adverse event is about to occur, and that intervention is required to do that. And I think the other thing, which has also been a very key learning with our own efforts at bolttech with artificial intelligence, it's rarely, if ever, going to be perfect. Maybe at very, very simple tasks or simple things. So many of the models that are developed have got precision gap, or there's an error rate, and technology by its nature is going to fail from time to time. So what that means for the industry is that recovery scenarios are still going to be the case. I don't think there's a scenario looking into the future where all of this AI is going to prevent every possible adverse event from ever occurring. So that means you're now in recovery mode. And when you're in recovery mode, there's certain things that the customer values. They value speed of response. They value the comprehensiveness of that response. They value that their insurance company can orchestrate across a myriad of services in order to remediate the situation that has occurred, and to really get the customer or the business back on their feet. And I sort of think a little bit more broadly, if we go beyond those sort of three core tenets, if we just imagine the profound impact we can have on humanity, if we as an industry, insurance companies, insurtechs, protection providers, if we can harness this to drastically reduce auto accidents, health issues, personal accidents, improving the well-being of our pets, and to better protect citizens and businesses who are vulnerable from things like cyber attacks. So if we're able to quantify a 30, 40, 50% reduction in claims that could be achievable, and I think that is achievable in many domains over time, that is an astronomical impact on society. And I think despite the volume and sophistication of some of the threats that we see in each of the domains in which we operate, I think we can truly make massive inroads into reducing these losses. So, I prefer, as a result, when I'm asked, what do I do for a living, I often tell people that I work in the protection industry rather than insurance or insurtech, because that's something I feel really good about telling people because of the impact we're making.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely love that. I'm next time someone asks me, I'm going to use your words, if that's okay. When you, obviously in your role, when driving the technology agenda for the bolttech business, obviously there's lots of technology decisions you'll be making with that in mind, that kind of protection mantra in mind. Would you mind sharing some of the, technology challenges or focuses of the business at the moment to be able to kind of ladder up into that grand mission and vision?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're fundamentally trying to do is to enable better access to distribution channels, and that's very core at what we do at bolttech. So if you're a bank, a telco, retailer, super app, or a tech company, and you're looking to just add insurance, one of the things that our technology does is to enable that. And we also realize, if you think outside of insurance, you think to some of the examples that I gave, most of those organizations have spent millions of dollars acquiring customers. So they see some of the power in our tech is being able to white label solutions, to be able to leverage our APIs, and to be able to embed insurance within their own brand and customer journey. So I think in the eyes of our customers, I think the flexibility and adaptability of our technology is really, really important. Of course, there's overarching things like privacy and security that are really a given these days, things that we need to meet. I think the other thing that we see that, there's often a lot of talk in the industry about the protection gap. And one of the things that we know, if we had to go out and acquire the 20 plus million customers that we have today, that would require an enormous amount of money and effort. And we've chosen to work largely in a B2B2C model. And one of the benefits of that B2B2C model is we get access to the customer base of those partners that we work with. And some of the learnings that we've had around that, those customers have often got, very diverse, often unfulfilled insurance and protection needs, sometimes for not just traditional products like home and auto. They might be more things like micro insurances. So that's an interesting trend for us. I think another thing in respect of our technology, when you think about any form of marketplace, there's often a question asked, does supply come before demand, or does demand come before supply? And I think one of the things that we're pretty good at doing, both with our insurance knowledge and our technology capability, is that matching of risk taking, whether that's traditional balance sheet providers or reinsurance providers, to where the protection needs are not being met. And I think that's, that can sometimes be done, say, through an MGA, but it's one of the things that we're doing, I think, intelligently, is that matching of demand and supply. I think also the other sort of major technology trends that I think are very relevant for us, and these technology trends are a little bit different depending on the vertical in which we operate. So you can look at some of the secular things. If you look in mobility, you've obviously had a big shift towards ride sharing and smaller modes of transport, but then you've got the mega trends like electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles. When you look into the home, you've still got a long way to run in terms of the way that IoT devices are being installed in the home, and the way in which we're starting to get more real-time monitoring. In the cyber area, we often talk about the power of AI in a preventative sense, but there's a lot of AI out there that's being used for the wrong causes, and one of those areas happens to be cyber. So it's almost a bit like an arms race. I think when you think about cyber threats, that the preventative approach has got to be moving at least as fast as the attacks are being prepared and orchestrated. I think there's also technology coming on board, beyond the way the industry typically thinks about traditional underwriting, where we can think more broadly about risk scoring and quantification, beyond those staple products like home, car, and life and health. We're looking at ways to deliver solutions to address all of these shifts that are taking place, and also to help people realize that they might actually have a protection gap. I think that lack of knowledge about where a customer or business may lack coverage is something that we want to close through intelligence and education. And I think probably, just one last point I'd make on that as well. I think by virtue of the fact that we operate in more than 35 markets in Asia, Europe, North America, and also more recently in Africa, we know for a fact systemically many of these markets are heavily underinsured. So, even just solving for some of the most basic protection needs in some of the emerging markets, it's really important that our technology solves for that.
Yeah, that makes India is another great example, right, of an emerging market that is very kind of low penetration from an insurance standpoint. I want to dig a little bit, if it's okay, into something you mentioned just in my last mention, which was around kind of the matching of capacity to distribution, and obviously there's top down, there's distributors and other platforms that are looking to take insurance products and deliver them to their customers, and often don't care or don't want to know or don't want really know who the right capacity providers or right product for their customers, etc. And obviously you've got this kind of big knowledge base of a bunch of different capacity and carriers and types of insurance. And can you talk a little bit about how you've gone about this kind of matching of capacity to distribution?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think one of the things that might surprise the audience a little bit with respect to us being an insurtech, we've obviously got hundreds of products that we put on the shelf of our insurance exchange, and there's literally many more hundreds of variations of those products. So we get into thousands of combinations of products. But when you look at traditional insurance companies, not every insurance company wants to underwrite every specific risk. So one of our most powerful use cases is where we help insurance companies go into other product verticals where they don't have a risk-taking appetite. So, for example, they might be in the business of auto insurance, but they realize sometimes contextually in a customer journey it makes sense to offer the customer a homeowner's protection. Often the car and the home go together. So our technology does that in a very seamless way, and some of our most powerful use cases are such as those. If you take another example in North America, for example, we know if you go into the state of Florida, it's a hurricane-prone area, that there's been a protection or insurance gap through the application of data analytics, the use of water leak sensors. We had an ability in that market to create a very unique proposition for the market because we knew that water leaks are the number one cause of damage in the home, and we're able to bring technology to bear to drive down loss ratios and to be able to effectively meet the unmet insurance needs of the homeowners in the Florida market. And I'd say, as a more broad trend, as I mentioned through MGAs, we're constantly looking around the world at opportunities where there are these unmet protection needs and partnering up with the balance sheet providers and to create these new and interesting insurance and protection models that solve for those needs.
That's super interesting. There must be, i.e. Insurer X sells home insurance, Insurer Y sells health, but they would love to, the Insurer X would love to take a health product. And so you've got this capability to map that product into their journey somehow. And so that insurer then, doesn't have to take the risk, the balance sheet risk, but is able to kind of solve the customer's problem. That's, super smart, super interesting. And you just talked there around 30 different markets. The insurance industry is a complex one, and each local market has its own nuance. And so have there been challenges in scaling through that many markets? And obviously you're licensed in a lot of those. And so how have you, maybe from a technology standpoint, what have been the challenges there that you had to overcome in scaling through that many markets with the divergence of customer needs?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges I'd say is getting enough sleep. So that's something I put a lot of personal focus on, and launching in 35 plus markets has certainly been very challenging. One of the things we often tell the outside world is launching in 35 markets wasn't always a deliberate intent. So when we look at some of the partners that we work with, when you think about original equipment manufacturers, for example, they might want to run a protection program in the markets in which they operate. And one of the things that forces us to think about is, do we want to launch into a new market so that we've got a consistent overlap with that partner? So we've had to address that several times across the journey. That's our partners have taken us into markets that we would otherwise not have necessarily launched in the same time frame. But ultimately, I think that's a good thing for us. I think with also respect of the sort of meeting local dynamics versus scaling globally, there are some competing challenges with that. So I think one of the things that we think about often around scalability, we have different business models to our platform. Our platform can be offered as a single tenant solution. Our platform can be offered as a multi-tenant solution. We can offer it in a SaaS mode or a platform as a service mode. And the reason in which we've got the flexibility around those dimensions that I just mentioned, the needs of each market and each vertical, they do vary slightly in that respect. As you mentioned, we're a regulated industry, but the regulations are not homogenous. So we have different regulations or variations of the same regulation in the markets that we operate, particularly in relation to things like data sovereignty and privacy, where there's been a lot of law and legislation passed in recent times. So one of the ways in which we do that, we try very hard to build our technology to the not the lowest common denominator, but in some cases the highest numerator, if you want to use that expression, because we believe that ultimately regulators over time, they do look to each other. And if we can be ready to meet the most stringent, highest standards of regulation in a particular market, often the level of effort that is required to replicate that into a second or a third market is much lower. So we tend to try and see the most regulated and best regulated markets as opportunities. I think also when you think about our architecture, one of the things that we speak of internally is our domain-driven architecture. And what we mean by that is, over the course of the journey, we have been able to look at the abstracted common domains, whether that's partner onboarding or whether that's payments or whether that's something in our supply chain, where we can abstract those components. We can build each component just like a Lego block to the highest architectural standards for security, scalability, reliability, resilience, and our ability to orchestrate across those components. And those components can be leveraged to meet the regulatory, security, privacy components literally anywhere in the world. So that agility in our architecture and infrastructure has been very core to what we do. It also enables us to be very flexible in the way we build solutions for our partners. And I think, perhaps the other thing I just mention is just being customer-led in everything we do is very important. One of the flip sides to being customer-led is you could interpret that to mean, does every customer voice have an input directly into our product roadmaps? And whilst I would say to some extent that is true, one of the things that we've had to get more and more disciplined about in every year that we've operated is how do we understand and synthesize the features that are most in demand in our product roadmaps. So we tend to look at those feature requests where they appear in multiple markets as opposed to just one individual market. Not always true, by the way. There are times where we do build features for a specific market. We're obviously trying to look at a more aggregated demand in terms of how we plan for the continuous development of our products.
Yeah, makes complete sense. One thing just to touch on that I think some of the audience may have missed, but I think is important, and that's that business model flexibility you just spoke about, and primarily the difference between SaaS and platform as a service. Would you mind just going into that just a little bit and unpacking that just a touch of what the difference is in terms of from a platform, customer experience perspective?
Yeah, there's a couple of fundamental differences, I think, between SaaS and PaaS. But in the eyes of our customers these days, I think most organizations are very comfortable with software as a service. I know I've been a CIO or CTO for most of my career, and when I think back to what that looked like in running infrastructure over the first couple of decades of my career, a huge part of my role and a part of the CTO's role was running data centers, worrying about things like air conditioning and cooling inside the data center, worrying about racks and power supply. And it seems like the days of that for most CTOs, it's not generally something that they have to worry about. And a lot of that has been driven by software as a service. The fact that we've got capabilities today through a secure internet connection. We can access software in either a single or a multi-tenant environment, and we can just consume that software just like the products just about all of us consume in our day-to-day lives as consumer, whether we use things like Gmail or what have you. The main difference, I think, with platform as a service, there's additional overhead that typically the customers looking to operate in a platform as a service mode take on with respect to instantiating, operating and maintaining their own infrastructure. So we can deploy our products and our software onto the customer's infrastructure. The platform as a service model tends to be a little bit more favored by industries that have got extremely high security standards. So banking potentially is one of those as an example, but that's really the fundamental difference.
Got it. Makes a bunch of sense. And often you mentioned a little earlier on too around the kind of the marketplace problem of chicken or egg in terms of getting capacity and getting distribution. And obviously you've kind of solved that and built something in the middle that kind of matches those two things together. I'm sure that there's lots of, outside of insurtech actually, folks that listen to the pod that are trying to build marketplaces. Is there any tricks of the trade that you guys found when you were trying to unlock that cold start problem of chicken or egg, and how you get carriers and or distribution partners, and how you solve that in terms of solve that marketplace problem?
Another great question, Nigel. And I think one of the ways we often think about this is just to look out there at other industries, look at the absolute best of the best. Who's been the market leaders in each of their respective verticals in getting that demand and supply matching, the orchestration across, and built really successful, sustainable business models. And the two most obvious examples around that we often talk about are Uber and Airbnb. And both of them have also got relevance with respect to protection and insurance. So course, yeah. I think for us, something our CEO is very strong on, I often think about the amazing capability of the product and technology organization that we've got in bolttech. Theoretically, we could build everything ourselves, but in practice, it doesn't always make sense to do that. And I think when you're looking at getting the matching of demand and supply correct, I think we've got no one's going to go to a marketplace that doesn't have product on the shelf. That's just pretty fundamental. So we think a lot about the speed in which we can get new products onto our exchange. If I go back over history, in some cases it took us months to get new product onto the exchange. We've been able to drastically reduce the time frame in which we can get new product onto the shelf using things like generative AI to do that. That's given us a really big step forward. I think we are constantly out in the market looking for new and innovative products that we can bring onto the exchange. We have a full-time dedicated team just focusing on supply, which may be a surprise. It's not just looking at the demand side. We're constantly looking for that, and we work with some of the most cutting-edge insurance companies in the world to get their products onto our platform. We're always looking for differentiation in those products as well. So, one of the sort of unique things that sits in the middle of our exchange, what I think the audience might find super interesting is, like, how do you possibly make sense of the different underwriting questions for a particular vertical, and to serve that up in a consistent customer journey so that you don't ask every insurer's question of every customer. It's not an aggregation of those questions. We've actually got to have a very, very sophisticated engine that we've built, and I might say almost perfected, but not completely perfected over time, that is able to adapt what we call the interview in a very, very dynamic way, and make sure that we don't unnecessarily clutter or complicate the customer journey. And then I think if you switch the thinking a little bit to the demand side, I think also if you look at a lot of SaaS companies out there, one of the pitfalls sometimes of their business models is they make it extremely easy for customers to subscribe or to consume their APIs. One of the areas that we often find is a little bit lacking is things like sales enablement. And in our device protection business, for example, one of the things that we've been extremely successful at, which is not even directly relating to the technology itself, it's our ability to work hand in hand with a partner to understand the dynamics of their customer base, and to use data and analytics to help enable the sales teams, whether they're in a physical store or whether it's through an online journey, to optimize the uptake of the protection and insurance products. So they're just a couple of ways I think we're getting the demand and supply side of the equation as balanced as we can possibly get it.
Yeah, of course, and it's not about selling more policies. It's about getting the customer the right thing that they need, right? Like, I think that's often misunderstood in terms of whatever is the kind of analytics that you have running over that customer journey to help the customer get the protection product they need when they're purchasing a device. Actually, what you're trying to do is give that customer the best experience that gives them the most information to be able to make an informed decision of whether that protections product is right for them. Is that fair in terms of I think something that is often poorly misunderstood, but it really sits at the core of kind of why you kind of obsess over that customer journey and making it as good as it can be?
Yeah, I think it is very true, and we look at other capabilities like our intelligent product recommendation engine.
Yep.
I think that's another key thing that we've been able to develop and build over time. I think the other thing that's really playing out, as I mentioned earlier, because of the way the value chain is shifting in insurance, we are starting to see an era of significantly more intelligent protection products. And again, I'm using that word protection because I think when we apply intelligence or specifically artificial intelligence to product constructs, that has a very interesting effect on competition in the marketplace. You know, is the most competitive product in the future going to be the insurance product that offers the same level of protection at the lowest price? Or is it going to be the product that has that embedded intelligence that gives the customer the confidence that they may never have that adverse event from occurring? And that's got a lot of consequences for us in terms of how we help our product partners, how we help them to best represent their products in the various journeys and solutions that we provide.
Yeah, totally. And you mentioned generative AI there, and we managed all the way to get here before we diving a little bit deeper into it. And you gave us a little teaser then of using some Gen AI to help with some supplier and question set onboarding. Can you go? What can you share? What can you share around the use cases you're thinking about? Maybe use cases that the real life in action in terms of uses of Gen AI, whether it's on that kind of supplier onboarding or question set onboarding. Love to understand.
Yeah, I think one of the things to think about as an industry, there's no doubt the hype around generative AI has just been at an absolute extreme level, particularly for the last year and a half. And I know personally, even doing things like what we're doing today, and inevitably AI is the subject that's center of attention. But I also think I can speak personally to the fact I've been working with various streams of AI for getting close to 2 decades now.
Yeah.
And whilst we've seen a really strong evolution because of Gen AI getting into the hands or the fingertips of so many people, and it's almost like that light bulb moment that AI is upon us, most people are now aware of the fact that various forms of AI have been used in our consumerized lives for a very long period of time. So that's really woken people up to the fact this is happening. It's real. I think also one of the challenges that I've got inside of bolttech is reconciling the hype and the mania that you see in the media at the moment that AI is going to replace every human, that it's going to solve every problem on the planet Earth, and it's going to do it in a very short space of time. I think we all know that that's not completely the case or true. We've got a very exciting level of interest in this new stream of AI that I think is ultimately going to be really good for helping to take the industry forward. And I can say inside of bolttech, it's always exciting because these are the kind of things that are enabling us to take the industry forward. When I think about practical use cases, we have use cases going across all dimensions of the traditional value chain. So when you think about pricing and underwriting decisions, when you think about things like claims automation, or a really key topic for us at the moment is thinking about customer servicing, particularly when you look at some of the lower ticket insurances, like say device or gadget protection as an example. In order for us to keep those products affordable, it's very important that the cost to serve remains in check. And interestingly enough, some of those products that I spoke about are often the ones where customers want to be able to make a claim 24/7, sometimes very late at night, where they've lost a device or the device has been damaged. That's a really stressful moment in those customers' lives. So I think Gen AI has got really, really powerful applicability in the traditional insurance value chain. We've spoken a little bit today about how that value chain is shifting, and the new frontier for competition really moving beyond those things into that prediction, prevention, recovery, remediation. And I think we've got to think about how we smartly apply technology in that reduction of loss events. So I think one of the concepts we're thinking about is more real-time protection as we expand across verticals. And, insurers today are not making a significant use of real-time data. The industry historically has been very good at that backward-looking perspective as a way to look forward, modeling based on loss history or loss data in order to make predictions for the future. But we've now got access to so many real-time streams of data, whether that's our own data or from other third-party data sources. So the way in which we've been using some of that in some of the more forward-looking areas, I mentioned the fact we're building out preventative technology for water leak detection in Florida. We've been doing remote diagnostics for smartphones using computer vision and a product that we call Click to Protect. So that's a form of AI underwriting or damage assessment. Talked about customer servicing. What I think is very interesting with customer servicing is that's probably one of the best areas where we can combine the power of predictive AI with generative AI. We can predict that the customer may have a servicing need, and then we can immediately trigger the use of generative AI to solve for whatever that servicing need is without the customer even potentially having to call us. And then I think the last area, which I think is also a really big focus for both insurers and insurtechs, we've got this relentless demand for efficiency these days. So there's many internal use cases for generative AI. I think one of the more interesting ones that we're using it for, is things like RFP responses. We do respond to quite a few of those, and they're very time consuming. So we're activating capability there. It's whether it's code generation, debugging, whether it's fraud detection, A/B testing. We've got dozens of use cases now with generative AI for internal use that are helping us either deliver better customer service or just to operate more efficiently.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think it's Klarna, isn't it? Klarna's been very outspoken around how they're really innovating around customer service, and I think they've actually kind of almost replaced entirely, almost 100% of their customer service team. I think that's a really big jump and a really big step. But I think you've really articulated really clearly how it's not just in a single area of the business. And I think the only other thing you touched on, which is very important, and maybe people don't think about this about the insurance industry, but it has been very deep within AI across the sector for a very long time, and not within the generative and LM sense, but the more traditional algorithmic AI has been really kind of key to a lot of the insurance decision making for a long time. And so I actually think in some ways the insurance industry is ready for it, and maybe better more than some other sectors because it's been kind of so entrenched within the thinking for such a long time.
Very much so.
Yeah. And so I could literally talk to you all day, but I cannot hold you all afternoon. And so I want to try and wrap with looking into a crystal ball, if that's okay. You are sitting at the top table and leading technology of one of the key players in this space globally. And so I think you may have some really interesting insights on where you think the world is going to go. And so would you mind sharing, as we're moving, I guess, towards the end of 24 and into 25, over maybe the next 12 months and then maybe the next 5 or 10 years, what technologies you think are going to be really impactful? Where are you spending some of your strategic time thinking about as a business, and where you're trying to position yourselves for the future?
Yeah, I love the opportunity always to talk a bit about the future, and it is a chance, as you said, to get the crystal ball out a little bit. I think some of the trends that we're paying a lot of attention to, we're not completely deluded or overwhelmed by the Gen AI hype.
Yep.
We're finding very, very practical ways to make use of it. We're just at the early stage of that. As I mentioned, it's the combination of generative AI with other streams of AI that are providing some extremely powerful use cases. We're going to continue to explore those. I think agentic AI is another area, and I think specifically AI that can work more autonomously within the right guardrails.
Yep.
I think there's really powerful potential that we're looking to extract from that. I have to mention quantum computing, not because I've got a killer use case for it, but just because it is an area that we continue to pay a lot of focus and attention to. The reality is we haven't really yet found a use case in our business that can't be solved with cloud computing. But what we're also seeing is a colossal increase in the volume of both structured and unstructured data. And when we think about risk prevention, we know that some of the models that we're going to have to produce in order to do that, it's going to require some very, very powerful computing capacity into the future. So that's an area we're looking at. Broadly speaking, any technology that aids us with hyper-personalization, but in a way that maintains privacy and security, that's an area that we're acutely interested in. So, imagining in the future that technology and the insurance industry is able to know and understand your personal and family risk profile at such a deep level that protection products could be developed or adapted on the fly. That's a really interesting concept as we look forward. There's also, technology streams and secular changes around autonomous vehicles, wearables, IoT, 5G, 6G. All of those sorts of things are very much enablers for some of the things we've talked about today. And I'd probably close by just saying, a little bit of a left field one. One of the things that is a huge personal interest to me is technology that's helping the workforce transformation that we have to go through with AI at the fingertips of every single worker in the industry. So anything that helps reskilling, re-education, people engagement, enabling people to be more productive, and also developing the skills that are needed into the future, such as prompt engineering, emotional intelligence, and how to speak to machines and do that in a way that delivers the kind of outcomes that we're looking to deliver. All of that is of great interest to us.
David, thank you so much. It's wonderful to hear what the world is going to look like, and just casting a forecasting eye is wonderful to hear. And so, look, thank you so much for your time today. It's been wonderfully exciting to be on the sidelines and watch the growth of the bolttech business. And so, the best of luck for everything that's coming. I think listening to everything that's going on inside of the business, I have absolutely no doubt that the business will continue to go to strength to strength, though. So, thank you so much for your time today. I hope you really enjoyed it as much as I did. It was a fantastic episode, and David had an enormous amount of insights to share. So if you do want, and you're just listening via streaming, and you want to look at the video episode, you can jump into our YouTube channel. The link will be in the description below. And as always, if you want to hear from some more industry leaders who are pushing the boundaries of insurance, please do check out our other episodes on the podcast series, Building Tomorrow's Insurer.